right. Okay. Well, Jonathan, are you running the show here today? Are we leaving you in charge? You making it happen?
Is that me
Yes.
today?
That's you.
I guess I'll see what I could pull together here pretty quick.
Oh,
Oh, dude, where's the fade out? The music that was so abrupt.
when you, it only allows one share. I tried. I was starting to pull it down, and then
I guess I had this reversed here. There we go. Sorry about that. Nicole, I want to hear. Oh, someone's having fun here. All right. Wins of the week. Let's hear it. What wins are we having this week? We give you some time. No weather wins allowed. This is real wins. Business wins, personal wins. What's going on? Small, big. Let's
I
hear
got
it.
a few wins.
Tell us.
few wins. Let's go, Noah.
So ever since starting and getting on the Google, I've gotten 4 calls based on Google searches, never have before at all.
Oh,
So 4 appointments, 2 jobs out of those 4 appointments through Google.
wow.
Hey, I
Come
love that.
on.
Awesome.
I see Mark over there getting you a thumbs up. I have a feeling maybe he was in a similar boat where he hadn't experienced any from Google. Yep. And then it's not a myth. It is true. So appreciate hearing that.
Turns out people use Google.
They do. Any other wins? We'd love for you to just unmute and fire away.
I got a job. I had a job yesterday that I didn't want, but I bid it where I didn't want it, and was totally shocked when the guy said yes. So now I want it.
Good.
I love it. Oh my. Oh, never, you'll miss 100% of the shots you don't take, so there you go. That's a great example of it. Hey, if I'm going to get this, let's make it worth it. And you got it. So way to go. I love that. Any other wins here?
I got one.
Tell
Brett,
us.
Well, after 7 years of being in our location, we're running out of about a 2,800 square foot brick and mortar showroom. We are moving today. We've got all manpower on deck, and we're moving to a 6,500 square foot new location today, along with
wow.
it also involves a business merger of a company that we bought out that's 44 years they've been in business. So now I bought that company and we're moving in on their location. So pretty big change today. It's so.
Are you telling me we're not going to see
Exciting.
Awesome.
we're not going to see the closet behind you anymore? Is this not going to be a thing?
Yeah, wait, yeah.
I'm getting emotional.
I'll show off my executive suite office next week, Jonathan.
All right.
Ooh.
I'm looking forward to it. Wow,
Yes.
that's huge.
That's awesome.
That's huge.
And
Hey, all
you
thanks
still
to
made
you
it to the
guys.
call
I mean,
today.
seriously, Redmond growth. I couldn't have done it without your help. Seriously. I mean, the last 2.5 years, we were doing about maybe 400 to 500K a year. And now here we are. We sold about 1.4 million last year. And it put us in a position to buy out another company that's averaging about 1.6. So with this merger, we're going to have right off the bat a $3 million a year company.
Wow.
Wow.
It's so
Right off the bat.
exciting,
And
Brent.
myself
We are.
in that position 2 years ago. And
Yes.
I see this company that I bought, which is really structured. It's really well. It's got a lot of things in place I don't, but all the things that's missing, I feel like what I can do with my company and to that company is going to be so exciting. Of what's so neat in 2 years of working with Redmond Growth is it put me in a position of almost wondering what my job is here in my own company, meaning I am almost the least important person in my business, because it's fully functionable. There's somebody doing everything, which has put me in a position to want more, which is why I bought another company. I'm ready for the next, whatever you want to call it, the next
phase.
The next phase, and
Next
it's gonna be a ton
adventure.
of work, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna be
Yeah.
a lot of work, but I'm so ready for it. I'm mentally prepared to take on that next challenge. So props to Redmond Growth.
Props to you, Britt. We're so excited
Yeah.
to see you in this new stage, to
Props
watch
to
all the
me.
growth. No,
Can
just
you
Yeah.
Rudy gets
also
no
make
credit.
sure that everyone knows Tim did not pay you to say any of this?
Yeah,
It's
it's
not.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, just to keep
Yes.
growing your guys' head even bigger here, with everything I've learned to get to this point of success, there's no intentions of like, or there's fullest intentions to continue to work with Redmond Growth. I mean, that without a doubt is budgeted into forever. Like, I don't see why I would ever stop working with your company. Now that I'm here, now I need you guys even more to continue to help me through this. So just sharing that with all you guys of where I'm at with the success I've had. There's just a whole nother hurdle to get over, and it'll just open up new challenges and new conquers. So
Yes. Well,
we
we are
appreciate
so
that.
excited,
Here we
Britt.
go.
We really
Oh.
appreciate you sharing, and I'm glad to hear it, because I would definitely miss our chats each week. So, well, Rudy, I'm gonna follow up that. I hope you have a kick-ass presentation, because we should just stop the call from
I'm
after
not
that win. No
All right.
pressure.
Let's do it. Let's just meet up next week. All right. In fact, once we get to you, everyone with a couple years here at Redmond Growth, once we get to a point here where you're bored with what you're doing here, we refer therapists. So there's always a path at Redmond Growth.
What?
I'm just kidding here.
What is? All right. Let's get going.
All right, guys, great wins. Hey, by the way, there's nothing wrong with therapists. That was just a joke. Therapists are a great tool for many things. Just in all honesty. All right, guys. We talked about a few months ago, I don't know when it was, but over 6 months ago, kind of a leading management group call here. I'm going to call this part 2, just because in this call I'm forced to really pick out a few principles here and there and help you put them to action. The last thing I want to do is talk about 26 things that you're just wondering, okay, what can I do with this? It's not very clear. And so this is part 2. I'm going to pick out a few more important principles that you can start putting into action here immediately to develop yourself as a leader and effectively manage your team. And even if you're in a position where, hey, I'm kind of running solo here right now, well, all these principles still apply. Just keep them in mind, especially as you're looking for team members, and apply them to yourself as much as possible. This is all still going to be very relevant. Okay. First off, why is this important? Why is effective team management and leadership important? Well, first off, what happens without it? Ineffective team management leads to negative work environment, lack of growth, disengaged and low performing employees, and much more. Has anyone here ever had a job working for someone else that they just hated? Raise your hand. All right.
You talking about the job or the person?
No, they hated the job. They hated the job. And so one of you, tell me what you hated about it. Just in all honesty. Did you love the work environment? Did you love the opportunities that were presented to you? I mean, obviously not, because you're on this call, but it turns out you know, when I think back at a job I used to have that I absolutely hated, it was a very negative environment. People are bad mouthing each other all the time. People wanted you to fail because they wanted to climb on top of you. And it's just horrible. And you can't deal with that. And so, you know, chances are if you raise your hand, you probably didn't have a very great management, you know, at your job. Your boss probably didn't show that they cared very much. They probably didn't appreciate you very much, or at least demonstrated that, which is just as important. So I'm going to go through a few key subjects just about this here today. And what we're going to review is holding your team accountable. What does effective communication look like? And cultivating a strong company culture. So I don't, you know, these are all really big topics on their own. So I'm going to kind of go high level here and talk about some specific things that you can start doing and just some real good principles you can start implementing. But this is by no means a thorough, exhaustive these topics here. So just keep that in mind. You could always go deeper into this. Okay, right off the bat, holding your team accountable. Let's talk about this. What you've got to have right off the bat, of course, are clear performance indicators, KPIs. KPIs are critical to measure progress and achieve goals. You know, so what are those KPIs? What are some examples of those? Most of you should have those set up already. But if you don't, that's going to be maybe weekly revenue goals for your service technician, or you know, daily appointments set for a salesperson if they're in charge of setting appointments, or their closing ratio, or how many quotes are going out, how many quotes are getting accepted, you know, reviews gathered, all these KPIs. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So important. You've got to know your KPIs. If you don't know your KPIs, we can talk more about that in a breakout room, or address it with your coach here. Okay, so step one to holding your team accountable with KPIs is you've got to set a realistic and specific goal. It's got to be realistic and specific. So a goal is not a dream. You know, you ask somebody, hey, what's your goal just in life? You know, it's like, well, I want, and they mention, it's so common to mention just something that's, you know, that they don't even believe in. It's a dream. I hope one day I just end up with a lot of money and you know, just something just that they don't even believe is possible. You know, kingdom of the world. It's like, trust me, you don't want that. Just FYI. You know, and so a goal is not a dream. It has to feel achievable. You know, if I say, Brent, you know, without moving, you can go ahead and grab this pen and you'll have $10,000. You want to try and grab that right now? No, you're not supposed to move your hand because it's obviously not true. You know, it's obviously not going to happen. You can't reach this thing right now. If I was behind you in your office, handing it a few feet away, now you'd actually try and reach for it. You'd actually try and because I'm much closer to you. There's a chance you could actually get this. And you know, if something is so out of reach, no one's going to even bother lifting their hand. It doesn't matter. So first of all, it's got to be realistic. I know I'm harping on this, but it's important. Sometimes like, well, what's the goal? Like, well, I want my service technician to bring in $15,000 a week. That would be great. Okay, that's not a goal. Stop. That's just you know, that happens rarely, and that's not a realistic, achievable goal. Okay, so the next thing is it has to be specific. So, you know, if a specific doesn't mean a range. Sometimes I'm like, hey, what's your goal? Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm going to use this continual example of weekly revenue with the service technician because it's just very tangible here. But if someone says, well, maybe 8 to 11,000 is my goal. All right, so it is 8 or 11. If it's not specific, then your team, if you don't know your goal, then your team won't know the goal. We've got to have a moment of celebration. We've got to have a number. We've got to have a moment where they know they've hit it and it feels good and there's a celebration. So realistic and specific. Step 2, you've got to communicate the goal to the team. You've got to keep it at the top of their mind. You know, ask yourself, how will my team know about the goal, their weekly goals? You know, put it on the board in the office, bring it up to them over and over, bring it up in your meetings. You know, we're going to talk about that here in a minute, but you've got to be real. It's not just something you mentioned one time and then expect them to remember or even care about it because you bring it up 2 months later and say, hey, you remember that goal we set? I mean, I think so. Was it? No, that's not the way it works. You've got to communicate it to the team. You know, if I asked a couple of you, hey, what's your goal? And asked you, does your team know? Would they say the same thing if I asked them? You know, would you put money down on that? If not, then maybe we got to revisit that. Step 3, we've got to review their performance weekly and hold them accountable to that goal. This is not a spontaneous check. This isn't, I'm going to catch them and ask them on Tuesday morning. They're not going to see it coming. We're going to look at their performance and we'll see if they hit it. No. Moment of accountability. It's got to be. And you've got to make sure that they know when it is, because that changes behavior. When they know something's coming up, it turns out we want to hit the mark. If you're catching them by surprise, that's not hitting the mark. You know, it's completely different. It's the difference between a speed limit sign that says you can't go over 50 miles an hour versus a police officer hiding in there. You know, one's gonna, well, maybe that was a bad example because people don't listen to the signs, but salespeople. This could be, you know, people out in the field. This can be anybody that you have an expectation of. Let's have a time when we identify issues, concerns, failures, and celebrate success. If you're doing something well and they're doing it anyway, well, let's just celebrate them. That's great. Way to go. That's what I'm talking about. You're doing a great job. Keep it up. And other times it's not happening. That's when we've got to ask questions. You know, we have to make necessary adjustments. It's not just, well, what did you do wrong? You know, it's, hey, what happened here? Did you have enough work on the books to even bring this in? I mean, it's okay to ask those kinds of questions. You know, the only problem is if it's like, well, I guess they had a good reason there. I can't argue that. Well, you know, when does a good reason become an excuse? Well, if they have the same quote unquote good reason every single week, that's becomes an excuse at some point. We have to just figure something out. You know, if I'm telling my boss I'm late at work because of traffic, you know, maybe that'll fly -1 times. Okay, if it's like, okay, sure. If that's happening every day or every Monday, it's like, now this is just an excuse. You're going to have to figure this out. You're going to have to own this. And so it's about working together and making sure you can help them reach those goals. This actually has to happen. You have to talk about these things in the meetings. All right, here's the main action for you guys. If you're not already doing this, make sure number 1, you're tracking. You've identified and start to track KPIs. And then secondly, schedule a weekly time to review that with your team. Do that now, right now. Actually, we're going to talk about it later too in breakout rooms. So we're going to make sure this happens. All right, guys. Next, I wanted to go over effectively communicating with your team. All right, communication is key to any successful relationship. We always hear that, right? It's communication is key. Communication's key, right? It's almost just said over and over again, but we don't even. I feel like we don't even really know what it is. It's just a catch-all statement for, you know, when someone's not going well, you just say, well, you got to communicate more. It's like, well, what does communicate actually mean? You know, and this is just as important in personal relationships than business relationships. The relationship of a business owner and their team. Turns out, great communication doesn't happen by accident. You have to be deliberate. If you haven't asked yourself today, well, maybe today's a little early, this last week, hey, how can I properly communicate with so-and-so? How can I make sure to come across the right way today? How can I check in with so-and-so? If you haven't asked yourself those questions, even in a quiet voice in the back of your mind, then you're probably not doing as well as you could with communication. Turns out the best things in life never happen by accident. They happen because you worked hard to achieve them. You set your focus on them. Okay, so what does that mean? What we want to do is really create an environment of open and honest communication with your team. If they don't feel like they could ever come and approach you for concerns or just anything that they're dealing with, well, then maybe this isn't an environment that we have, that we make sure we cultivate. A quote I love, and this is by Patrick Lencioni. He wrote the five dysfunctions of a team. It says the first dysfunction of a team is an absence of trust among its members. Without trust, conflict is inevitable. What is conflict? That's talking behind people's back. That's just unhealthy. And he's not talking about like good building conflict, and he's talking about destructive conflict here. It doesn't help your team. It pulls it apart. It creates resentment. And so that's the first dysfunction here. It's absence of trust. How do you build trust? We need to start being vulnerable with the team. That doesn't mean you have to cry. That doesn't mean you have to get deeply emotional about things. And if you do, that's not a big deal. Just try not to do it every time. I see a hot take from Bryce getting ready over here. So no, it doesn't mean you have to be deeply emotional or deep about something. It just means you encourage team members to share weaknesses, mistakes, concerns. That's what begins to help create an environment of trust and empathy. When as a leader, you need to lead by example, and they'll follow your lead. So if you're Mr. Perfect here, and you have and you never have a concern or a problem or mistake you want to own up to, it turns out that they're going to act the same way.
Yeah, the hot take that I was going to interject here with, and I have another one in a second too, is being vulnerable with your team relates to the first thing that Jonathan talks about, which is communicating those goals. If you're frustrated or feeling the, angst or whatever you want to call it, of not hitting metrics, but you're not sharing that clear-cut communicated goal to the team, that's another form of being vulnerable. Hey, we're not making this happen. We're consistently behind on jobs. I'm personally frustrated at, and Gabe had a good point about this too in the chat about myself. How am I not equipping you guys? Or how can I better equip you guys to be able to do this? That's a better way to ask it. How can I better equip you guys to be able to make these things happen? Kind of that vulnerability in that aspect, I think is good.
And when Bryce says clear, that means one of my favorite examples of this. So my dad was my coach all through high school. He's been a coach for like 25 years. He coached me in golf and volleyball. And I would say I was not the most coachable individual. And I remember one golf tournament, I was sucking pretty bad. And he comes up to me and, to give me advice, to be my coach, to help. And I look at him, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And he just looks at me and he goes, you're just going to need to play better. Now, this is probably after him telling me what I needed to fix time and time again. And that was what he told me. As a business owner, you can't just tell your team, hey, I need you to do better. Or, hey, I need you to bring money. Or, hey, I need you. No, it has to be clear. This is what I need your average ticket to look like. This is the amount. This is the goal. This is how much money I need you to be bringing in each week. If you have a helper, instead of bringing in $5,000 each week, I need you to be bringing in $6,000 each week. You need to have clear cut, tangible goals. you can talk to your team till your face is blue saying, hey, I need you guys to do better, or I need you guys to do this. If it's still not getting done, that means we haven't been very clear with a tangible, actionable goal.
Great. Absolutely. You've got to be clear. You've got to have those conversations. Here's what I'd immediately start encouraging you to do here. To begin having more vulnerable conversations, to begin having more, even sometimes uncomfortable conversations that just begin to create an environment of trust here. And effective communication is regularly check in with your team members, gauge their progress, address concerns or roadblocks they may be facing. What does that mean? Just give them a call one day. Maybe you're driving to pick up some supplies, or you're having to do something. Just you have a moment, just give them a call or see how they're doing, and just check in. Say something you appreciate about them. Something out of the norm. You could even schedule it in your calendar. Actually, it can come across to them as spontaneous, but it's just you're intentional about making time for it. So just don't forget. That's the main thing. You've got to check in, just see how they're doing. Sometimes check in and ask them if they have concerns, how they're feeling. But it's if they feel you're being genuine and that you care and you have time to listen, they will talk. And I emphasize time to listen, because if they feel that you're just being fake, checking a box off off your to-do list, they're just going to give you the canned answer because you gave them a canned question. Okay.
Also on the time thing, like to your point there, Rudy, like some of you guys, like it may feel a little bit transactional because like you're thinking you don't need this. Like if you see a problem and something needs to get done in your company, like you're just gonna like jump in and do it. So like, maybe that's just how you operate. So a lot of you might be like listening to this and realizing this is good tips, but like also put yourself in their shoes. Just because you maybe don't need that overactive communication, or maybe you don't need additional training on certain things, like I do think it's important to just recognize, like, just because you maybe don't need this doesn't mean that your employees operate the same you do. So anyway, back to you, Jonathan. I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Absolutely. Here's a quote that I absolutely love here by Jim Rohn. Effective communication is 20% what you know and 80% how you feel about what you know. What does that mean? Well, how can you passionately communicate when you're not passionate? Notice there's passion in there. What if I just said, how can you passionately communicate when you're not passionate? That's just boring. That's the message just doesn't come across. So you've and I'm passionate about these things. You can hear it, and I'm not asking you to be public speaker expert, whatever you want to call it, William Wallace here, yelling that we must be free and raise our revenue. No, okay, that's not what I'm saying. It's just care about what you're saying because they can feel it. Demonstrate that in a way they can tangibly, just feel that you actually care. And that's so important. So if you're not into it, no one will be. I promise you that. Here's an action for you. You can schedule recurring, or at least a one-off meeting at the very least right now with each team member. Hey, when am I going to just check in with so-and-so? Or if it is recurring, it doesn't have to be like a weekly continual recurring thing one-on-one unless there was a good reason for it. But make sure that you at the very least set a reminder in your calendar. Hey, when can I just check in? I almost kind of want them to be taken back by it, because if it's not something you've done for a while, kind of like, what? Why are you calling me? Am I in trouble? If they feel that way, that's a good indicator that you should probably do it more often.
One thing I'll add while you're on this slide, Jonathan, is to me a very important thing. There may be some people on the other end of the spectrum that are saying my team communicates with me too much. They're too honest with me. All I hear is complaints and griping all the time.
Ooh,
at the top of the slide is effectively communicating. One thing that I always want to say in topics like these is, if the only way for a team member to address an issue to you or with you is by blowing up your phone, That's what they have to do. There is no alternative. If your phone's blowing up all the time, give them an alternative, which is, hey, periodically, I know that he checks in with me, or he or she checks in with me once every month or every 2 months, or these regular team meetings that we've talked about in other calls as well. Giving an outlet or an opportunity for communication rather than blowing up your phone. If you hate that, make an alternative.
Absolutely. No, that's really good. And this is, you know, I'm the kind of communication I'm talking about here. I appreciate that distinction. Like, well, I'm having one-on-one calls with these guys all the time. You know, it's like I'm not talking about agenda-based communication. You know, what is agenda-based communication? I need this, you do this, I need this, can you get me this? No. I'm talking about beyond that. Just check in. How are you doing today? It's like, well, I'm doing good. Could I get some more tile, please? You're like, no. Those talks, those check-ins, just see how they're doing, and begin to create more of a close-knit community, which really just comes into this next slide. It's about creating a strong company culture. If you don't set your culture intentionally, it's going to be set by your employees. And trust me, you don't want that. I'm not saying your employees are bad, but that's just the law of entropy. It's up to chaos. They're not thinking about how am I going to set the culture today. They just kind of it just happens. Okay, so here's what we want to do. It's a strong company culture. Why is this so important? It can attract and retain top talent, increase productivity, innovation, and it creates a sense of purpose for your team. People want to feel a part of a team. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. You know, they want to feel that the environment is challenging them and it's helping them. It's producing growth in them, in their skills, and even personally. And these are things that, you know, you may really never hear. It's very rare that you'd hear an employee say, hey, boss man, boss woman, I want to feel part of something bigger. Can we work on that today? You know, I want to be challenged more. Could you do that? That's just something you have to do as a leader. And I promise you that the ones who hate it aren't meant to be there. They're not a good fit. The ones who love it, those are the right ones. Those are the ones who need to stick around. Those are the ones who are going to really benefit from this. So one of the first steps you can do here, and I almost kind of don't want to bring this up sometimes, but it's, and I'll tell you why, but it's establish core values and behaviors that align with your business goals and lead by example. And I say, you know, sometimes core values, people just list off, well, here's 3 things that are really important to me, you know, integrity, honesty, trust. Okay, we almost said the same thing 3 times, but you know, it's and it's not really caring about your core values. In fact, I would call it your core value. If even you had one value that was really important that you would actually care about, then just stick to one. You know, that could be, you know, hard work and why that's so important to you and how that played and, you know, explain why these values are important to you personally. Explain, you know, usually when there's a value inside of you that you care about, it's because you've probably had an experience tied to that value. You probably have a good reason. You know, if someone has a value of hard work or doing the right thing when no one's looking, they've been faced with that situation a lot, and I'd like to think they've made the right decision more than once. Okay, and then lead by example. You've got to just, if they don't feel that you're being real about it and you're not leading by example, it's not going to mean anything to them. Kind of like the whole theme here. All right, you've got to create opportunities for team members to connect, build relationships, you know, inside of work and outside of work. You know, I'm not saying you need a weekly Friday night barbecue or anything like that, but just having an occasional event outside of work, you know, or even during work hours, or you can have times when, you know, it's not just about running to the next project. You know, if all we're ever doing is running around, you know, no one on the team will ever have time to build a relationship with each other. And if there's no relationship, then you're just as good as the next job they may get. So what I would really, really recommend is, just one action that can begin working on this. This isn't the A to Z plan here, but this is something you could start doing if you're not doing this already, is just take time and recognize people for good work, for positive behavior, even the less tangible things. Hey, thanks for, Larry, thanks for coming to work with a smile every day. I mean, your numbers are a little off, but thank you so much for showing up with a smile. I that's so important to me. And suddenly it's like, wait, that seems to be important to the boss. That seems to be a value of his, and when you appreciate a behavior, it turns out that multiplies the behavior. That's a relationship transform tip. I promise you this. Spouses, if you want your spouse to do more, appreciate them for that.
Mark just typed in the chat. He said the word attaboy. And that is such a good way to phrase this. If the only, so like for Brent, for instance, Brent's no longer in the field with his team. I've got quite a few other clients who are not in the field with their team anymore. If the only interaction that the team has with you as the owner is negative, like if the only time that you're talking to them is to reprimand them or to get on to them or they're in trouble, they're not going to like you. And you don't need to be best friends with your employees. In fact, I wouldn't encourage being best friends with your employees, but they need to like you. They need to feel motivated by you. If they don't like you, if they're not motivated by you, then they're probably going to end up leaving, or you're not going to be able to get the most out of them. And so simple things like what Rudy just said, where if you're going to reprimand somebody, make sure that you follow the hug, kick, hug method, where, hey, you show up every single day. I never have to doubt if you're going to show up and if you're going to show up on time. And I so appreciate that. I wish I could get every single employee to have that amount of respect for my time as you. Now, what I need you to do is I need us to get a little bit better about doing home safety inspections so that your average ticket is increasing. This is our goal, and you're a little bit below that goal. Now, again, I can always rely on you showing up. We love having you part of the team. You want to sandwich bad news within good news. That's going to allow them to not dread anytime you're pulling them away or approaching them.
Very, very good. And it doesn't, that's if you have bad news to mention. You don't want the only time you're communicating to be a sandwich, because they'll begin to feel that. Definitely have those moments where you're appreciating them just for the sake of it. And that's, and it's like, well, I don't have anything to appreciate this employee for. Well, sorry, find something. Or maybe they're just not the right fit. We're not going to cover everything from A to Z on this topic, but if you have those specific questions, just bring them up in your breakout room, because that's what we're doing next. I had this beautiful summary slide that we're just not going to go through. So if you want to screenshot that, you can, but
Wait, on that note, guys, if you don't have access, if you've never been shared, we do have a spreadsheet that has all of the previous group calls where you can access them on YouTube, along with all of the PowerPoints. We don't record the breakout room, so it's only going to be the presentation. But if that's that you're interested in, I do not recommend trying to burn through all of them. Maybe ask your coach what call would be the most helpful for you to listen to. But if that's something that you've not been given access to or don't know where that is, please email your coach so we can get it over to you.
Absolutely. Well, Bryce, we're ready for breakout rooms when you are.
I am ready. If you don't have something on your screen, let me know. Coaches, you know where to go.